In your head, becoming a wrestler probably goes like this. You train, you do some matches, then if you're good, you sign with WWE and debut like the powerhouse that you are. As we know in the modern day, it's way more complicated than that, or at least it can be. There's no one path to getting into the world's biggest wrestling company, and sometimes you're even asked not to be a wrestler. Be it a way to get you on TV or another act that needs some extra bodies and it's been decided you will do, a lot of individuals make their debut in front of the WWE universe as just some random person that you wouldn't even look at twice. Let's give them their due right now, because we're nice like that. I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Remember to subscribe, and this is 10 WWE superstars who didn't debut as wrestlers. Number 10, Cesaro and EC3. Did you know that Cesaro and EC3 were first seen on WWE television in August 2006? Because they did, even though their official debuts weren't till the 20th of April 2012 and the 7th of December 2010 respectively. This is what went down. Way back in the mid-2000s, both men appeared as policemen as they stood behind Shane McMahon in full-on protection mode. McMahon was mad at D-Generation X and wanted them arrested, and clearly the best way to do that was to get some indie wrestlers to do his bidding for him. It is said that it was this cameo that resulted in WWE hiring Cesaro years later. How that worked out I don't know, but maybe Vince McMahon just really liked his handlebar moustache, or Fu Manchu as it's sometimes called. As for EC3, obviously he arrived as Derek Bateman, which people said at the time was the reason he didn't get a shot. As we know now, it seems simply to be that WWE hates the man known as Ethan Carter III. He'd probably rather be a policeman now instead of a dude that gets beaten up by Braun Strowman or literally doesn't get on the show. Number 9, Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes appeared in front of camera on the 31st of March 2007 in the world of WWE, and then debuted officially on the 7th of July 2007. Also, somehow Cody was involved with WWE for 9 years before he ventured off to change wrestling. Isn't that terrifying? We're all way too old and need to run faster to keep away from the specter of death. This was so long ago that Rhodes actually was the tag team champion alongside Bob Holly, where they beat Trevor Murdoch and Lance Cade for the titles. That doesn't even seem real anymore, especially when you realize he was starting off when Chris Masters was still in the company. Before all this happened though, a super young looking Cody and Goldust inducted their dad into the Hall of Fame. Cody had been in developmental since June 2006, and for your last fact, his partner down there was Shawn Spears, aka Ty Dillinger. Still though, a good 4 months before he would appear on Raw, Cody was seen at the Hall of Fame ceremony just as he was about to embark on his own pro wrestling journey. Number 8, Curtis Axel. Following on from Cody was Curtis Axel, who had almost the exact same arrival in the WWE. He stood alongside the Hennig family as they paid tribute to Kurt Mr. Perfect Hennig, his dad, who was going into the Hall of Fame. The difference was, whereas Rhodes was ready to be let loose, Curtis, or Joe Hennig back then, wouldn't do anything for years aside from being used as a local talent ready to be squashed by Jesse and Festus. When he did get going in developmental though, he did receive some pretty good reviews, which led to a debut in 2010 on season 2 of the old version of NXT. For some reason, he then got the new name Michael McGillicuddy and was told to cut promos about flutes and breastfeeding. Thank goodness Triple H got his fingers into that idea and made it what he did, eh? Whole thing was a bust. It's still crazy he never really got a fair crack of the whip either, given his lineage. Curtis clearly has something. Hell, at this stage, he'd probably just take being an updated version of Mr. Perfect. In fact, I'd quite like that. Number 7, Braun Strowman. Given what WWE would do with Braun Strowman a year or so later, it's brilliant that he debuted as a member of Adam Rose's Party Pack, or whatever it was called. Loads of future stars got involved in that too, as Becky Lynch, Alexa Bliss, and even Simon Gotch were featured at some point. Obviously none stood out more than Braun because he's really, really tall. It was kind of weird that WWE would get him to do this, as usually Vince McMahon sees a big guy and just pushes them to the moon instantly. Having him as the Halloween Express gladiator is right out of left field. The whole story got weirder because Strowman never appeared on NXT as himself. He was doing some house shows and then he was thrown on the main roster instantly. It caused a right hoo-ha at first as people didn't think he was ready, but as the days went by, Braun settled into his role very nicely. Now he's an essential part of the roster. The best part is when his career comes to an end, some kid will do some digging and see that this is how he arrived in the WWE. Just alongside some guy called Adam Rose. They probably won't believe it. Number 6, DDP. One of the more famous incidents of this ilk, DDP was debuting in WWE before he was even a wrestler. A manager and commentator for the old AWO and FCW, he tried out for a speaking role in the WWE in 1990 and somehow ended up being a driver at WrestleMania 6. Drove his pink Cadillac to the ring with the Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine and Jimmy Hart in the back, and it's a good thing that he did, because they all had a match with the Bushwhackers. From this point on, however, Diamond Dallas Page went on to forge a Hall of Fame career. He smashed it in WCW, and although his proper entry into WWE didn't happen until 2001, and really didn't go to plan, he still had his run. Plus, he did have a match at WrestleMania 18, which was doubly cool because it was in the same arena as WrestleMania 12 years prior, where he had been behind the wheel. He even beat Christian to retain his European Championship. And if all that isn't motivational and inspirational, I don't know what is. Good old DDP. He always believed. Number 5, RVD. Another fan favorite, Rob Van Dam would be seen on WWE television 14 years before he ever had a match. Why? Because he was but a child way back in 1987, called upon by the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase to get in the ring and kiss his feet. A staple of the act in the late 80s, where DiBiase would embarrass the crowd thanks to the temptation of earning a quick buck, Ted promised $100 if a young RVD puckered up. Can you believe it? He did it. It kind of makes sense though. It probably paid for his wrestling training at the time, as well as a lot of other things that Van Dam enjoys, and we'll just leave it there. You have to assume no one in the company knew this guy would be lighting up the indie scene a decade later in ECW, and of course he went on to have a great WWE career after he debuted on the 9th of July 2001. And yeah, his first technical match in the company was the 12th of May 1997, but that was part of an ECW invasion as Jerry the King Lawler yelled at him. Either way, the shock factor still stands. Number 4, Ty Dillinger. Well, this one is just nuts. If you go back to the 5th of November 2006 Raw when Shawn Michaels went crazy and super kicked everybody he could, you'll see one Ty Dillinger appearing as Stan, a dude in the back who was literally there to be kicked in the face. To be fair, it all was quite amusing. While he would appear a few times on WWE's version of ECW as Gavin Spears, there was an odd relationship between the two from that point out. Dillinger would get hired, then released, then hired, and then released again. Each time he had to go through developmental, so while you could see him down there, his actual WWE debut wasn't until the Royal Rumble in 2017, when he arrived in the number 10 spot, of course. He got a pretty badass reaction to boot, and yet as we talk now, he's currently sitting out his non-compete clause after asking to be released from the company. Is AEW in his future? Go back and listen to the Cody Rhodes entry in this list. There's a big chance. Number 3, Shane McMahon. This one is kind of obvious because of who his father is. Shane McMahon was always going to appear on TV long before he was doing anything of note because he was Vince's child. There was no way around it. His first appearance came as referee Shane Stevens way back in November 1989. If you glanced hard enough, you could probably see the likeness, but that was the point. No one was really staring at refs back then, or now for that matter. It's weird. Throughout the years, Shane would get closer and closer to the ring, including as a backstage official attempting to end a Ric Flair-Randy Savage brawl at WrestleMania 8, and later as a commentator on Sunday Night Heat. Go and find that on the network as well if you fancy a laugh. It wouldn't be until December 1998 where he had what you could call a match, and there he was beaten by Mankind of Raw. Of course, he didn't lose clean, it was via DQ, and that was a sign of things to come. Still though, not so bad to start out as a referee and eventually have a Mania bout against The Undertaker in a damn Hell in a Cell. Really is the best in the world. Number 2, Natalya, Tyson Kidd, and D.H. Smith. In Your House Canadian Stampede is often called one of the greatest WWE pay-per-views of all time, and rightfully so. The card is not only stacked, but the main event is elevated to must-see masterpiece because of how hot the crowd is. You'd think the Hart Foundation were responsible for keeping the earth from exploding into the sun, the fans are so loud for them. After Owen Hart pinned Steve Austin to end the match, all 4,236 then living members of the Hart family filed into the ring to celebrate. Among them, as you figured out, were future WWE superstars Natalya, Tyson Kidd, and D.H. Smith. Remember though, this was all the way back on the 6th of July 1997. In terms of all three of them appearing on WWE TV, it wasn't until the 12th of May 2009, although again it's more complicated than that. Natty debuted on SmackDown in 2008, and while Smith was drafted to Raw at the same time, he never showed his face. Then in 2009, all three members arrived on WWE's version of ECW. The end. Number 1, CM Punk. CM Punk had been working in OVW since 2005, but didn't get in front of a proper WWE camera until WrestleMania 22. The show was in Chicago that year, which meant John Cena needed a big over-the-top entrance. Given the location, an Al Capone-like entrance was decided upon, and that meant when Cena was driving to the ring in a vintage 1930s car, he needed some gangsters alongside him. So if you go and watch this now, there perched on the side with a Tommy gun was none other than CM Punk. Welcome to the dance. A month later, Punk would win the OVW title before moving to ECW on the 4th of July 2006. That was just 3 months after he'd been part of this fake mob. From here, Punk went from strength to strength, even having his greatest feud on the main roster against John Cena. And guess where their best match went down as well? That's right, Chicago, during Money in the Bank in 2011. You can't write this stuff, even though WWE actually did. Know of any other superstars who didn't debut as wrestlers? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to WhatCulture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from WhatCulture, and I will talk to you again soon.